This is coffee as we know it. The perfect morning cup. An afternoon Instagram post. Or an after-dinner nightcap. But while everyone else has been looking at coffee in portrait mode, the impact of climate change, coupled with our love for coffee, makes us want to switch into landscape mode and look at the whole picture, take a broader view. Because only if we consider the landscape where coffee is grown, can we make meaningful progress in improving farmers' livelihoods and making coffee climate resilient. With over 2 billion cups of coffee consumed around the world every day, it's easy to forget that behind every cup, every bean, there's a story, a farm, a family battling longer droughts, heavier rains, lower yields, a family battling the effects of climate change. At Coffee and Climate, our mission is to improve the livelihoods of coffee farming families by developing the right tools and knowledge they need to implement climate change coping strategies. The time to act is now. Join us in switching to landscape mode, to consider the landscape and see the whole picture, so that we can make coffee climate resilient and improve the livelihoods of coffee farming families.
Fine, then let's get started. My name is Mike Opitz. I'm Managing Director of the foundation Neumann Stiftung. It is an international NGO working with many smallholder farmer families in the coffee sector, in countries in Central America, in Latin America and Brazil, in East Africa and in Asia. And I have the pleasure to introduce you to the Coffee and Climate Initiative, to talk about how coffee growing in the face of climate change can look like. And I would like to take you to Africa to remind us all of my first trip that I did in 1988. I was by then working with the German government, with GIZ, and I was invited to attend a workshop in Tanzania in the 𝗬𝗲𝗄𝗏 Mountains in the early days of sustainable agriculture. Now, I had the pleasure to be on the plane on a night flight, and when entering the Tanzanian territory, the pilot woke us up. I opened the window blind and I saw the African beauty, Mount Kilimanjaro, by then fully covered with snow and ice. Now, I also had the opportunity of going back to Tanzania, almost 30 years later in 2016 with Coffee and Climate, and by then, I again flew over Kilimanjaro and was really shocked to see how far the ice has shrunk. I felt bad actually sitting on that aircraft looking at this, because I was part of the problem, no doubt. With our way of consuming energy, of traveling, we definitely contribute to climate change. Literature says that the ice cover of Mount Kilimanjaro between 1912 and 2002 has shrunk by 80%. And by 2030, it's very likely that it's gone forever. But what are the impacts of this ice melting? What are the impacts for the people living at the bottom of the mountain? The loss of the glacier actually is critical for the agricultural system at Mount Kilimanjaro. For centuries, this system relied on the glacial runoff for irrigation in addition to the natural rains. In past years, however, the farming community experienced serious changes, principally in precipitation, but also the seasons got less distinct. Although annual rainfall is not really deficient, the volumes are fine, but it's the distribution that really gets tricky. It gets highly variable and causes threat to the producing community. At the same time, average temperature is increasing. Now, coffee, to the right, please, is an important crop in the area of Kilimanjaro. There are numbers of producers actually producing this crop since many, many years, and they see and feel the extreme events that impact coffee production in that area. And this happens during different stages of the development of the crop. Rainfall has become more erratic and seasons less predictable, as mentioned. Coffee flowering is one of the key aspects during the development cycle. It usually gets triggered by short rains in October. They end the dry period and stimulate the growth of the flowers, the opening of the flowers. Now what happens? Oftentimes now, during that period, the rain continues, which means that the flower development is weak. Thereafter, it turns drier and it turns more hot. And this causes then flower abortion. It causes less development of the bean, of the coffee cherries, and it causes also accelerated ripening, all of which definitely detrimental to yield and to quality. But this also, the changes of climate change, also they affect the food production and the food security of the system because of prolonged drought periods and rains not being there at the time required. One of the victims that actually suffer from these developments is 𝗬𝗂𝘂𝗧𝘂𝗧𝗂𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗂𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧 mountain in 𝗬𝗲𝗄𝗧 village. And he farms on an area of 2 acres, producing coffee and banana trees, but struggling to feed his family of 6. There is him, his wife, and 4 kids that depend on the farm. Now, in 2015, when we started operating with him, he was producing just 750 kilos of parchment coffee. And this was due to an effect of infectation of coffee leaf rust and flower abortion. Now Coffee and Climate comes into play. Coffee and Climate is an initiative that was started in 2010 with the perspective of supporting the producer community to better adapt to climate change. I will come to this initiative a little later, but let me come back to Mr. 𝗬𝗂𝗧𝗂𝗧𝗂𝗧, because he was invited to participate in a farmer field school. And together with other farmers from the area, from his peers, he was starting to assess the climate risks for his region and for his farm. He was also assessing the trends that climate change is causing. And based then on these first reflections by project staff, they were supported in identifying superior practices and tools that they could apply to strengthen their production system. They got trained good agricultural practices, proper pruning, appropriate use of fertilizers, best use, if required, of pesticides. But in addition to that, they also got introduced to climate smart practices, which is mulching, which is planting of shade trees, planting of yield-resistant coffee varieties. It is the digging of water trenches to harvest rainwater when it comes, and also support the drainage if it's raining too much. And he also learned about use of compost in his production system. For Mr. 𝗬𝗬𝗧𝗂𝗧𝗂𝗧, actually, mulching turned out to be just the most important and most impactful practice. This is because the mulching materials, like maize straw, like banana leaves, like remnants from animal feeds, like manure, they were readily available at the farm. And applying it to the soil, he covered the soil during the dry period. And to that, reduced temperature at the root level of the plants. He also controlled evaporation and had more water kept in the system. As the manure decomposed, it released nutrients to the soil and it enriched soil life. And soil life is not only good for maintaining a continuous flow of nutrients to the plant, but also maintaining more water in the system. So these are practices that helped him strongly to improve production of coffee, but also of his banana trees. And in coffee, he managed by 2020, with the support of the project and his own work, to harvest 2,000 kilos of parchment coffee. And this meant, together with banana, that he could more than double his income. From $2,900 for the family for the year, he almost reached $6,000 per year, which means that he grew out of poverty. The poverty line is $1.9 per person per day, and he managed with these practices and his results to reach $2.7 per day. And it's not the end game. Probably this can go on, depending on further development of markets for sure. But the important thing is that this enabled him to actually improve his livelihood situation. He invested in his farm, he invested in his house, he invested in his family by paying for education and better health care. So farmers in 𝗬𝗪 village got really motivated by his success and were frequently visiting his farm to learn from his practices, to learn from the impact that he managed to achieve with changes to his production system. And he turned out really to become a role model for the village. Mr. 𝗀𝗃𝗏𝗏 is one out of many producers in Kilimanjaro and one out of many producers in Tanzania and one out of many producers in the coffee sector. Giuseppe was mentioning 25 million, so there is a huge number of producers, of smallholder farmers that are definitely challenged to work in spite of climate change. A recent study of the Potsdam Institute on Climate Impact Research in Germany, they were looking into coffee and the coffee plant as such, and found that the coffee plant is drastically less suitable for cultivation due to climate change by 2050 in current production systems. I'm not sure how much you know about coffee, but let me tell you, us working in the coffee sector since long, we see coffee a bit as a Goldilocks crop. It doesn't like it too hot, it doesn't like it too warm, it doesn't like it too wet, it doesn't like it too dry. So it really is a crop that requires certain conditions. And part of that is captured here. Ideal growing conditions, for instance, for Arabica coffee, it's in the temperature range between 18 to 24 centigrades Celsius and above 800 meters of sea level. Anything warmer, different conditions. If it gets warmer, no, it's better. If it gets warmer, the plant gets stressed and produces less. It also means that the crop can ripen faster, which is detrimental again to quality of the crops. So coffee increasingly is being affected by drought, by storm, by unreliable rain and heavy rains, also by, heat events, and definitely in some places by frost. It was 2015 that the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, CIAT, in Colombia, was assessing the suitability of many, many coffee-producing regions around the globe. And here's one example from Honduras, where they basically found out, or basically project, let's say, in their models, that the area suitable for coffee growing can be halved by 2050 if no proper adoption takes place. The study also concludes that there are basically 5 big issues that are critical challenges for coffee. And one of which is the loss of suitable area, as he was just mentioning, and also the shift towards higher production areas. It is the increased stress of water. It is also the poor flowering and cherry development due to rising temperature and unreliable seasons. It is the increased outbreaks of pests and diseases, and ultimately, very important, the increased challenge on the livelihood situation of the farmer family and in particular women. That, as Victor was mentioning, doing much of the work in the coffee fields. Now, Coffee and Climate got founded in 2010 to address these challenges. It is an initiative that is private sector led. It is an open platform, and it is pre-competitive. We have with 𝗬𝗫𝗂𝗧𝘂𝗧𝘂𝗧𝗂 and his company, one of the founding members with us today, and we highly appreciate actually this continued commitment towards developing knowledge and coping strategies with the producer communities. But you see that there are many other companies that joined the initiative, and together with 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗂𝗧 are programming and supporting that climate change actually can be an element, an issue that farmers can cope with. We have companies here from Europe, from the United States, from Canada, and very important, also being supported by the Swedish development organization 𝗬𝗲𝗏, which provides us definitely also access to additional resources that help us to grow stronger and be wider in our scope of action. Coffee and Climate addresses adaptation and mitigation. Mitigation, obviously important because it addresses the root causes of climate change, which is capturing and storing carbon. Adaptation is the more complex part because you have many, many options which you can control and which you can work on. Coffee and Climate focuses on agronomic practices, but at the same time, knowing about the livelihood perspective of coffee growing in smallholder environments, it also addresses, with the ICP thinking behind, that Giuseppe and the colleagues were explaining just before, that income needs to improve for the farmers. It needs to be diversified. They cannot rely on coffee only. It's just too risky. They also work on food security. We also said that food gets affected. So diversification of the production system is essential to have a continuous flow of food for the families. We work on gender equality, we work on perspectives for youth, and we work on community-based development, knowing that many things don't just happen at farm level, they happen in the community and in the landscape. A very quick view on our approach, because it's really a stepwise approach that we apply in all the different locations where we operate with Coffee and Climate, starting with an analysis, identifying adaptation options, supporting the producers to bring them in the field to apply them, assessing what is happening, how this is changing basically the variables in the economic system, and then restarting or reapplying the circle, as climate change is not static but rather continuing and definitely causes new obstacles or new challenges every second day. Coffee and Climate is working in 7 countries today. We are in Honduras, in Guatemala, we are in Brazil, in East Africa and Indonesia, and these countries represent 60% of global coffee production and 50% of the global producer community. So we are operating with this initiative in locations that are really crucial and essential and important for the coffee sector. 𝗬𝗏𝗃 builds capacity. It builds knowledge, it generates superior experiences at farmer level, at farm family level, but also at farmer group level. And it always tries to promote practices that are assuring a sustainable and long-term use of the natural resources. So this work and these techniques include the promotion of shade tree planting. It is the establishment of diversified agroforestry systems, looking into agroecological principles and practices, like also displayed here with permaculture or with syntropic agriculture. We improve or support the improvement of soil management with all the different soil management practices or soil conservation practices that I was briefly mentioning before, like mulching, like composting, like the production of bokashi or biochar, like cover crops. It also supports the water improvement or improvement of the water management system of farm, enhancing the infiltration and then also the storing of the soil. It supports the rejuvenation of the coffee fields with drought-resistant and definitely also pest-resistant varieties. We work on simple irrigation methods, on solar drying, on alternative energy sources, on diversification, and yet also on generating more intelligence at farmer level by monitoring climate data. This all information that is being collected in the field, that is being tested together with producers, is being consolidated into an online toolbox. So this is all turning into public knowledge through the initiative. Everybody in the coffee sector, everybody on the globe can enter the Coffee and Climate toolbox and get access to information, to test it and validated information as we generate it in the field. Well, it's action-oriented. Coffee and Climate managed with the support of companies like ICP members, ICP shareholders with their project to reach as many as 100,000 farmers' families already. We also supported farms in improving, and 70% improved their farm management. 59% improved their yields. And in addition to that, we also supported that others operating in front of farmers got better prepared for using experience of climate change. These are 805 local trainers that so far have been equipped and qualified to also apply the methodologies and approaches. Well, the initiative continues to operate and continues to support producers as climate change accelerates. The recent IPCC report from 2022 was frightening. It was frightening for all of us because we had to identify, to see basically that change is happening much faster than we thought. And that change is happening actually at the worst end of our projections. So what does it mean? It means for us that we need to get faster in the work that we are doing. We need to get more relevant for the producers still and find ways to also activate other actors to make use of the experiences. With the coffee sector, I think we are well positioned to make a major contribution. The coffee sector, it was mentioned, is the second largest or most important commodity, global commodity after oil. It has an annual value of around $500 billion. It is more than 100,000 people that 100 million, people that in producing countries depend on coffee production. We have billions of consumers that appreciate coffee as a beverage for their pleasure. So we are well prepared to make a major contribution to address climate change and to offer partnership for other actors to join. This is what Coffee and Climate can offer. We have interfaces to engage with the initiative and to cooperate. We have the membership, obviously, it's open, I was mentioning. More companies are invited to join. If they are like-minded, if they want to open up sleeves, make their commitment happening on the ground and contribute to knowledge generation. We have communities, a community of practice or communities of practice in all the places where we operate, which means these are learning groups where local actors, implementing agents like us that are in front of the producers come together to explore what are the learnings that we all together have. How can we advance the agenda? How can we better cooperate? What's the next step to take jointly? Obviously, the producers form part as they are the ones that actually have the first-hand experience what climate change means to them. The training of trainer approach I was mentioning already because we furthermore are preparing for offering this as a service to members in the coffee sector who would like to make use of these experiences. The Coffee and Climate Toolbox, you will get the link on our last slide here. You can download take a photo of the QR code. And last but not least, we are working towards climate smart coffee regions where all these different actors can come together in a practical environment to align on their operations and on the way that they are delivering important services to the producers. It is up on us all to really create conditions that the farmers will continue to grow coffee as part of their livelihood strategies. And it's up to us that we will be able in the long term to appreciate our morning cup of coffee or our tasty espresso after lunch or dinner. It is up to us to give really the producer community a chance to cope with climate change in this very dynamic and challenging environment. Thank you very much. And that's the QR code I was mentioning. You can definitely take a photo and go to the internet.